Black Knight just reported that nearly 450,000 homeowners are now underwater on their homes as of the end of Q3. In fact, of all of the people that purchased in 2022 and got a mortgage on their home, 8% of those people are now underwater on their homes, on top of 40% having less than 10% equity in their property. Now, this is a situation concentrated mainly among FHA and VA buyers, and that's what we're going to talk about in today's video. We're going to talk about what's actually happening with foreclosures, when you should expect them to hit the market, and which homeowners are likely going to be the most affected through this foreclosure process. Now, before we do that, I actually want to take some time here and go over a couple of basic definitions of some words that we're going to use in today's video, so that if you have any questions about these words, you can actually go back to this part in the video and reference them. That way you have a clear understanding of exactly what we're talking about. The first word is forbearance. It is the act of refraining from enforcing mortgage debt. What that actually means is the lender allows you to miss payments, basically pushing those missed payments off until some point in the future. That's exactly what lenders allowed over the last couple of years due to COVID and the shutdown in the economy. The second word we're going to talk about is delinquency. Delinquency is the failure to make mortgage payments on a timely basis. Whenever you're not making your mortgage payments on time, you're in theory delinquent on that mortgage. The third definition that we're going to talk about is foreclosure. Foreclosure is when the mortgage lender takes possession of the property after the mortgagor failed to make their payments. In foreclosure is the process of foreclosure. And lastly, REO. Real estate owned. This is the amount of real estate owned by lenders. And usually when a property reports as an REO, that means it's bank owned. The person that had that mortgage on the property and foreclosed on the original homeowner now owns that property, and in turn, it's an REO. Now that we got the definitions down, I want to talk about what's actually happening right now with delinquencies, with homes that are coming out of forbearance, what's actually happening with foreclosure, so you know exactly what to expect in today's market. On top of that, we're going to be looking at some foreclosures in my market. At the moment, we've had foreclosures increase. We're going to talk about the number that's currently sitting on the market. We're going to take a look at these properties, and the most fascinating part about what I'm going to show you is we're going to look at when these properties went into foreclosure, so that you have an idea once a property forecloses, once people miss payments, when you can expect those homes to come to the market. Now, as you can see from this chart here, the percent of loans that went into foreclosure actually increased in Q3 with the end of the foreclosure moratoriums. But compared to the second quarter of 2022, the seasonally adjusted mortgage delinquency rate decreased for all loans, actually to the lowest level in the history of the study, dating all the way back to 1979. So while we have seen foreclosures increase, we're still well below where we have been historically. In fact, both Fannie and Freddie released serious delinquency 90-day plus data monthly, and Fannie Mae reported that the single family serious delinquency decreased to 0.67 in October, and that's down from 1.46 in October of 2021. At the same time, Freddie Mac reported that the single family serious delinquency rate in October was down 0.66%, and that's down year over year from 1.3% in October of 2021. This graph here shows the recent decline in serious delinquencies. While Black Knight has reported that foreclosures have increased from the record lows last year, we're still 55% below pre-pandemic foreclosure starts. A lot of people out there, when they hear the word foreclosure, they immediately think 2008, the last housing crash that we had. In fact, the only housing crash that most of us have ever experienced in our life. And so that's what most people want to see when they're thinking the word foreclosure. But the reality is the pandemic-related increase in serious delinquencies is way different from the increase in delinquencies that we saw last time coming out of the housing bubble. Now, if you want to see how this time is different than 2008, do me a favor and smash that like button. And there's three primary reasons why this time is different. One of the main reasons is that supply. As you can see from this chart here, current supply is sitting somewhere around 3.2 months, which means we have very little active inventory on the market, especially compared to the housing bubble, where we had nearly 12 months of supply of homes at that time. On top of that, the lending standards this time are way different than they were back then, as you can see from this chart here. And the primary reason this time is way different than last time is foreclosure starts. We are still well below levels seen prior to the pandemic. On top of that, most homeowners have equity in their homes, putting many of those homeowners in a much better position prior to them actually missing payments on the loan, with many of them being able to restructure their loans as they came out of forbearance. But the reality is we'll likely see an increase in foreclosures over the next year just because some of these people will need to sell for one reason or another. Some of these people will get laid off and need to sell their property and they'll be underwater, and some people will stay and they'll end up in foreclosure. So we're going to see foreclosures increase, but likely not to the level that most people want to see. At the moment, nearly 25% of 2022 FHA and VA purchase holders have now dipped into negative equity, with 80% having less than 10% equity. So if you're in an area that had a large concentration of FHA, VA buyers in 21 and 2022, these are the buyers that could be affected the most, especially if they need to sell their property or are in a position where they can't make their payments. But at the end of the day, if you're a buyer out there waiting on foreclosures to come to the market because you think you're going to get some sort of deal, I would tell you not to hold your breath. And the reason I say that is because I don't think you're going to see the increase again that most people want to see. But here locally, where I'm located here in Orange County, California, we've had a total of 10 foreclosures that have closed over the last 6 months. So we've had 10 people that went into foreclosure and actually closed on those properties. But here's what's really interesting. At the moment, we have 6 foreclosures on the market. We're a county of nearly 3.3 million people, and there's 6 active foreclosures on the market. And that's not the crazy part. The crazy part is when these properties actually went into foreclosure. So what I thought I would do is show you the property and show you the tax records of when it went into foreclosure, so you have an idea of how long this process takes, so that if you're sitting on the sidelines, you know when foreclosures are going to come to the market in some cases. Now, with that being said, I actually blurred out the full address on these properties as well as the MLS number because I didn't want to put a bunch of information out there on people that have foreclosed. Now, I'm sure you can go find it if you're looking at it. This property is located on Pendleton. It's in Santa Ana. It's been listed on the market for 14 days, so it just came on the market. But here's the crazy thing is, you're wondering, well, did this property just go into foreclosure recently? No, this property actually went into foreclosure back in 2005, and they've been fighting the foreclosure process ever since, as you can see from this information here. And that's pretty much the same story with every single one of these properties that I'm going to show you. In fact, 5 out of 6 foreclosures that are actively on the market started before, during, or right after the last housing bubble that we had. The next one we're going to talk about is this house here on Palmyra, here in Orange. This property went into foreclosure back in 2007, and as you can see, they've been fighting the process ever since. On top of that, you got the one on Alhambra. That's here in Huntington Beach. This property started the foreclosure process back in 2009, fighting it, perhaps going in and out of foreclosure, and 13 years later, it finally foreclosed. The next one is this property here on Thackeray in Laguna Niguel, listed at $1.6 million. This property started the foreclosure process back in 2006. Guys, that's 16 years ago that they started the foreclosure process, and these people have been fighting it ever since. And lastly, property here on Rose Trellis in Irvine started the foreclosure process back in 2009. So 5 out of the 6 properties that I just showed you started the foreclosure process prior to 2009. So these aren't people that recently purchased properties, that recently missed payments during the pandemic. These are foreclosures happening from people that were already in foreclosure prior to the pandemic. So if you're somebody out there currently waiting on foreclosures, it's important that you understand how the foreclosure process works. Here in the state of California, we have a process where a lender can file a notice of default after you've missed 3 consecutive months. So after you're 90 days late, the lender can issue a notice of default. And an additional 90 days after that, so 180 days in total, the lender can issue a notice of trustee sale, basically putting that house up for sale. But the reality is, any homeowner that fights this process, that tries to work with the lender, that gets an attorney involved, files for bankruptcy or what have you, it pushes this date out further and further. Whereas you can see from the examples that I showed you earlier, some people can be in their homes for 15, even 16 years in some cases, which is absolutely insane. So while I do expect the housing market to continue to slow, housing prices to continue to pull back some, I don't believe that you're going to see a major increase in foreclosures due to many homeowners out there having equity in their property, in addition to many homeowners out there having locked in super low interest rates on their loans. But at the same time, if you're a home buyer out there looking to purchase property, just make sure you're buying for the right reasons, you have a longer term time horizon, you have money in the bank, and you're not stretching yourself on the payment.